All right, so we are in Jonah, and Jonah 1, we're going to begin in verse 4 here in a minute. The mantra through this series is basically this: God is calling you to play a significant role in someone's eternal story. So the whole series through Jonah, that's the main theme all the way through. God is calling you to play a significant role in someone's eternal story. Okay, so now we've got these little huddles in this church so you can turn and talk to each other. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. I know it's annoying. I know I drive you nuts, but I want you to talk in church. All right, so turn to the person next to you and say this: God is calling me. Wow, that's pretty bad. I mean, is it okay for me to say that? Okay, let's try one more time. Say, God is calling me. That was good. That was better. To play a significant role in someone's eternal story. All right, one more time from the top. God is calling me to play a significant role in someone's eternal story. Out of all the commentaries I've read leading up to this, the one that described the meta theme, the big idea from this text the best, I'm going to share with you every week. It says this. It says, the Lord, this is the whole story of Jonah, the big idea from it. The Lord is a God of boundless compassion, not just for us, Jonah and the Israelites, but also for them, the pagan sailors and the Ninevites. All right, God, the Lord our God, the Lord is a God of boundless compassion, not just for us, Jonah and the Israelites, but also for them, the pagan sailors and the Ninevites, those that are very different from us. We are taught from a young age to think economically about everything, especially in our culture. So we're very, very careful about the things we invest in, right? Like, we want to invest in things that are going to give us the desired outcome, our desired outcome. And if we come across something that is not going to give us the outcome that we think it ought to give us, then we choose not to invest in it, okay? For the next few moments, you got to really turn on your brain and listen close. And so what we do in our culture at a very young age is we decide not to invest our time, our energy, or our money into things that we see as a bad investment, something that's not going to produce what we believe it ought to produce. And if it doesn't produce what we believe it ought to produce, we won't give money to it, or time to it, or energy to it, or even attention, whatever, to it. The funny thing is, with some eternal things, God's economy works differently. And one of these primary ways is in evangelism. So all through the Bible, God calls the prophet, somebody to proclaim the good news, the hope of Jesus Christ, all back in the Old Testament, even to follow God like Jonah did with the Ninevites. He calls them to go and to share this truth with them. Now what happens is we have, in our modern day, we would look at that and we'd say, you know what, I don't feel smart enough to share with them. I mean, they're not going to respond right because I'm not a good evangelist. Or I know these people really, really well. I know my neighbor well, and if I was to be a witness to them, I think they'd respond poorly, so I'm going to choose not to invest in it because it won't give me the desired outcome. But in God's economy, it's a little different. Our faithfulness with what He has instructed us to do is separate than their faithfulness to respond correctly to the information they received. All right, pay close attention to this. So what this means is, if God puts it on your heart to share the hope of Jesus Christ with somebody, and it goes bad, you are not less faithful. If God puts it on your heart to share the hope of Jesus Christ with somebody, and it goes really good, and say they fall on their knees and weep and cry out to God, and oh Lord, I'm so sorry, and you're standing in Walmart going, wow, didn't see that coming. If it goes so good, you're floored by it, you're not more faithful, you're the same faithful. You're the same faithful as the guy who shared the gospel and it went bad. You're the same faithful as the guy who shared the gospel and it went really well. Your faithfulness to do the right thing with what God has given you is one issue, and a separate issue is what they do with the information. You are called to share the hope and love and truth of Jesus Christ, independent of how they respond to it. You're called to do it. You are not more faithful if they respond really well, and you're not less faithful if they respond really bad. You're same faithful for responding. All right, let's take this a little further. Jonah 1, 4 through 6. Jonah 1, 4 through 6. But the Lord hurled a great wind. Hopefully you got your Bibles open. You can use your phone if you've got this. Jonah 1:4. We're going to start there. So if you pull your phones up, that's fine. I trust you're not playing Angry Birds or, whatever. That's all good. Jonah 1:4, we're going to start there. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. All right, so imagine this in your mind. I just want to share the story. I want you to really imagine this. Jonah's at sea. Last week we talked about the story leading up to this. Jonah's at sea. He's running from the call of God, refuses to do what God wants him to do. It's a massive storm shows up. They're on this boat. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God. So different people, different faiths, all calling out to their deity. And they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea. Okay, so imagine them. They're freaking out, storms raging, throwing the stuff overboard into the ocean to lighten the load or to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the innermost part of the ship and laying down and was fast asleep. So the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish." Okay. Imagine this in your mind. The storm is raging. The waves are crashing against the boat. These well-seasoned sailors are scared. As the waves are crashing against the boat, I'm sure they're freaking out. They're going crazy. Everybody call out to your God. We have nothing left to do, nowhere left to go. Please, everybody do something. Call out. So they're all calling out to their God. They've done everything they can. They're afraid they might sink. All these lives might be lost. And while everybody is going nuts, hoping, praying that they survive this, Jonah, almost like in slow motion. I mean, I see this in my mind, like a movie. The storm is raging, slow motion, the waves crashing, lightning flashing, and Jonah just walks to the middle of the boat. All this going on around him, walks to the boat, goes down to the bottom, like he isn't even aware of the chaos or doesn't even care. And he lays down. The Bible Knowledge Commentary says this really well. It says, in contrast with the concern of the mariners, Jonah's reaction is amazing. He went below deck, the phrase below deck, and fell asleep, undisturbed by the storms tossing the ship. Perhaps he felt secure there. Obviously, he was insensitive to the danger. He was insensitive to the danger. Ironically, a pagan ship captain had to call a man of God to prayer. The captain was desperate. Every known God should be appealed so that one might grant relief from their peril. The phrase, "we will not perish," the need, looking at this phrase specifically in verse 6, looking at this, it says, the need was so great that the men despaired for their lives, yet God's servant slept. What an object lesson, the Bible Knowledge Commentary goes on to say. What an object lesson to God's people. Then and even now, to awaken from the apathy as crying people perish on the sea of life. The pagan sailors appear to be more concerned about dying people than Jonah. He doesn't care if they die. He doesn't care if he dies. He just refuses to be faithful. When I first started off, I was finishing my undergraduate. So if you're not in the Wesleyan system, to be a Wesleyan ordained pastor, you have to have all of your education, and then you have to go through a few years of internships, and then you can apply for ordination. It's kind of a long process to become a pastor. And I was coming to the end of my education. I was starting my internships. And as I was in that, one of my assignments, I got assigned to a number of different areas, and then they, of course, rate you on it. And so I worked with children for a while, and that went bad. I'm not a good children's pastor. Love children, have 3 of them myself. I'm just not good at pastoring them. Sit down and talk about transubstantiation with a 3-year-old. Just doesn't work. So I am there. Didn't work so good with the kids, but I did my best. And then I had to do my rotation. I had to move up and work with students. That was better. High school, college did better yet. And one of my assignments, I was given the task to spend a semester working at a church. And it was an older church. It was a really early service. I think the service started like 8:30 in the morning, something like that. And I had to go full suit and tie, and I only had like my high school suit that I only wore to dances. So like the white collar was stained yellow. It was bad. That's all I had. I was a poor student, man, trying to get through school. And so I showed up there, and I remember one of my first times there, I walk in, it's early in the morning, I'm barely awake, and there was an older gentleman. One of the guys there I really ended up enjoying, but this one gentleman drove me nuts. he was a greeter at the door. And I walk in, and I'm young, and they know that these interns, there's a couple of us that are there doing our rotation. And I walk in, and I shake this guy's hand, and he's kind of a close talker. You ever met those people? They come in, they're like this far from you. So this older man like pulls me in really close. It's kind of one of these like deals as he's right here in your face. And I'm like, hi, my name's Mike. It's good to meet you. And he's like, let me tell you about some stuff. I had no idea what was coming for months. Every week. And man, the first time he got up that close, what went through my mind was, where's the gum? But I didn't say that. And so I'm there, man, the dude's right there, and he begins to share with me, and week in and week out, he would tell me how horrible everything is in this world. How horrible everything is. The economy's falling apart. My generation, of course, he blamed my generation for everything that was wrong with the world. That was really fun to get to hear as a new guy coming into the work world. So my generation, we don't work hard, we're lazy, we're bad with money, we're destroying our country. My generation's awful. Every week, pull me in, and I got to be there. I can't walk away from this, man. And so pull me in really close, and I get that breath every Sunday morning early, over and over again. Awful, doom and gloom and misery and terrible, and the world is falling apart, and it's so bad, and your generation has messed it all up, and I can't stand. Over and over, week in and week out. He'd say things like, I can't believe you're ever going in the ministry. It's not that you can ever fix this stuff. People don't even care about God these days. Everything's on and on, week in and week out. Doom and gloom and misery. It was awful. Maybe that was like the trick. It's like boot camp for pastors. If you can survive this 6 months, you'll have no problem the rest of your time in ministry. I have no idea what they were thinking. But man, I'm there, and I got bombarded with how awful everything is and how miserable he felt. And his body doesn't work right. He wanted everybody to know, and everybody to know how much he hurt, and everybody to know how bad everything was. Every week, over and over and over again. It was rough. That was the first person I ever met where I really began to realize that he was so focused on his misery. There's no way he could ever see anything outside of himself. And I think we do some of this. I'm going to come back to that story in just a minute. I think we do some of this in some ways too, where, if we've had a bad season at work, or we're struggling with finances, or we're just not happy with our current state of life, we can get so internally focused. Like we go to buy groceries, and the whole time we're walking around the grocery store, we're thinking about our struggling finances or this fight we had with somebody. We're so caught up in our little quibbles, our frustrations, that when we get up to check out, we don't even notice the lady that's checking us out. Or we go to get our hair cut. And we can sit there with somebody, and as I'm getting my hair cut, I'm not really listening to what she's saying. I'm thinking about my frustration or things that I've got to work through. And I'm not even aware that she is there. I'm so caught up in my own frustrating things that I'm not even paying attention to what's happening in the world around me. And I think there are a lot of Christians, and I'm talking specifically to Christians. If you're not a Christian, you can listen in, but this isn't for you. I think there are a lot of Christians that believe in the idea of Jesus, and they love the idea of Jesus, but they are still internally miserable, distraught people. And the reason they keep, every time you bump into them, what spills out is anger and hate and misery and how terrible it is, and everybody's ruined everything. Every time you bump into them, what spills out is this nasty, gross stuff. And I really believe that poor me people, this Eeyore, internal, miserable, me-focused people, poor me people, rarely live spiritually fulfilling lives. They don't live spiritually fulfilling lives. You can call yourself a Christian because I met him. You can grow up in the church your whole life. You can volunteer at the church for years and be a miserable person who has no hope. I've met him. Well, now he's in heaven, I'm assuming. But I know it's possible. And I remember as I was coming near the end of my rotation working there, show up again, pulls me in, doom and gloom, misery, everything's terrible. I mean, at this point, I've got the speech down. I want to pull him in and go, I know my generation is awful. We're terrible people. We're ruining everything. Everything that, I mean, the reason you're sick, the reason you feel bad, you got a cold, it's because I was born in the late 70s. It's all my fault, right? I just wanted to finally just admit, it's all me. Everything that's terrible in the world, it's me. I get it. It's me. I get it. I wanted to do that really bad, but I didn't. And as he was sharing, I remember at one point, he was talking about how everything's falling apart and it's bad, misery, doom, and gloom, and it just hit me. I really believe Jesus is the answer. Now, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. I mean, just simply that. I really believe, as he's talking to me and sharing all this misery, it just hits me. I believe Jesus can heal broken families. I believe that Jesus can give purpose to the people who have none. I believe that Jesus is the greatest hope. I believe that the more the storm rages on, the better it makes Jesus look. I believe it. And all of a sudden, as he's sharing with me, doom and gloom, misery, awful, it's hitting me. This is the greatest opportunity in American history. As, of course, I'm thinking of this from his perspective, right? This is the greatest opportunity for me to shine the light of Jesus because it appears there is no other hope. Poor me people, Eeyore, miserable, turned-in people. You can be in the middle of a world searching for answers, crying out for hope. The storm is raging on, and you walk by it in the middle of the mall or the grocery store, getting your hair cut, and you listen. You don't even hear the conversations of people struggling with, spouses that are leaving them or families that are falling apart. You're not even aware of it. You don't even hear it. You're missing all of the call for hope all around you. You walk right past as a storm rages on, and you sit down and you get your hair cut, and you're missing all the conversations of people going, I need hope. My spouse just left me. My kid has this. It was in the hospital last week. And all you're thinking about is, I can't believe what was on Fox News last night. And the storm rages on, and all you're thinking about is, man, I hate the way this feels, or what's wrong with these people, or you go to the supermarket, and as you walk to the supermarket, the storm rages on, and as you check out your food, you don't even look the lady in the eye to see how sad she looks. Because like Jonah, you just walk down to the belly of this beast. You don't live with purpose, you're waiting for death. All while you call yourself Christian. You believe in the hope from a distance, but you don't own the hope in your heart. Jonah 1, 7-9. And they said to one another, come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. Then they said to one another, tell us on whose account. By the way, I think if you're an underliner, this is a great spot to underline or highlight if you use something digital. But it says, so they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. That seems really arbitrary, but it's really important, that phrase. Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation, and where do you come from? What is your country, and of what people are you? And he said to them, I'm a Hebrew. I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Now notice this, especially that phrase, they cast lots and the lot fell to Jonah. God uses this apparent random event, the casting of lots, to place the blame on Jonah. The casting of lots, this is a Bible knowledge commentary. It's really good just to understand what's happening historically here. The casting of lots to determine a decision, in this case, to find a culprit, was common in Israel and other countries. And it's also used in Scripture quite a bit. Leviticus 16:8, Joshua 18:6, 1 Samuel 14:42. There's a bunch of scriptures. And perhaps what they did is either take a straw, and one was shorter and the rest were longer, or maybe they marked one stone out of a number of them and they put them in a container and one shake it and then one's taken out. And whoever has the short straw or the marked rock, they use that as some divine intervention because they couldn't figure out the answer, the casting of lots. God expressed his sovereignty over Jonah's affairs, causing the lot, causing the random chance. If you really take that historical, contextual, old idea, that random chance to fall on him, on his disobedient prophet. Now, here's the thought from this that's really powerful. One of the undertones of this ancient text. Nothing is really random. Nothing. The people you work with, go to school with, the time and history you were born, the fact that you are here today, your job, your residency, your relationships are not without purpose, and neither are you. Be faithful to God's call. He has you here for a reason and a purpose. All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to stop for a moment. I wish I could pause the sermon and sit down with you each individually. I want you to think about your neighbor. Maybe the one that drives you crazy. I want you to think about your coworker. The people that he allows you to work with. He allows you to work with them. I want you to think about the street that you live on. God plates you. He allows you to live on that street in this house. The family that you're in. Put a face in your mind of that neighbor, of that coworker. Put a name. And as you drive home from work, frustrated about your finances, frustrated about relational things that aren't working right, frustrated because you'd love to make a little more money, frustrated because you'd like to live in a different house, frustrated that you have to live on this block, frustrated that you can't be surrounded by great Christians who are really, really nice people all the time. As you're frustrated about all those things, you drive by, the storm rages on, and you miss the incredible God-given opportunity that you're in right now. You miss it. Jonah 1, 10 through 13. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them so. Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. And he said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea, then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Now notice what's happening in the text. Jonah doesn't say, "You know what? We just need to pray, and I need to call out to God and say, at the next port, drop me off because he asked me to do a mission and I'm going to do that." He doesn't get on his knees and say, "God, forgive me," directly, right? He just says, "Kill me." I was reading through a number of commentaries on this. There really are countless Christians who believe that Jesus existed and believe that he walked on this planet and have some level of faith in him and maybe even go to church every week. But for whatever reason, they're never going to actually live the Great Commission and Great Commandment out. They're not going to live missionally. They wear the Christian t-shirts, they go to Christian concerts. They maybe even volunteer as greeters at a door or ushers or in a children's area. But they're not really ever going to live the Great Commission and Great Commandment out. And when God does bring in somebody that's seeking, all they do is want to tell them their misery, instead of be light in theirs. And I think for many of us right now, maybe for you, you're even so mad at your neighbor, you'd rather God take your life than go over there and make things right. You may be so mad at a sister or a brother or an uncle or a cousin, you would rather, God, kill me. I'd rather have cancer and die than talk to them again. Or at an ex. But nothing's an accident. The street you live on, the people that you're around. The enemy's trying to do a lot of evil and damage with it. But if you could just pull that metaphorical old man in and go, I believe there's hope in Jesus. You speak life into darkness. You change the system. I mean, the way things work are rocked. Everything changes when you choose to be the light and hope. Because nothing's an accident. Jonah 1:14-16. I'm going to invite Jason up. We're just about done. Therefore they called out to the Lord, O Lord. Now this is the sinful pagan sailors. Therefore they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. So Jonah hits the water, the storm stops. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. Back to the sailors. Notice God used Jonah even in his rebellion. What do we know so far about evangelism from this? God is calling us to play a significant role in someone's eternal story. Not just the people you like, but them. The ones you don't. The ones not like you. What do we know so far about evangelism? You are to share that hope, independent of how they receive it. You are not more faithful if they receive it well, or less faithful if they receive it poorly. You are same faithful for doing what God's asked you to do. The weight is on them to do the right thing with it. By the way, I know I am one of the few that thinks this way, but I believe that too about the homeless man on the side of the road. When I pull up, I just did this the other day with my kids. My son was asking me about it. I had a 20 at one bill. And my sons are old enough now. My daughter's still young enough. She doesn't really pick up on what's happening. My son is old enough. He gets it. I pull up. I'm like, hey, come here. I try to say something like, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but God's put it on my heart to give to you, and I really believe there's hope in Jesus Christ. And then I give it to him. So I attach something pretty heavy to that bill. And I get it. Every time I share stuff like that, 25 people come up and go, they're just going to buy beer and cigarettes. Yeah, you're probably right. They probably will. But I believe in my heart, I'm called to be faithful to the poor, independent if they respond correctly to it. I believe one day I'm going to stand before God and he's not going to say to me, Mike, did you only give to people that you were sure did exactly what you thought was right for them to do with the money that you gave them? That's a whole lot of you in that statement. I really believe from the text. Now, we can be foolish with that. We don't want to be foolish with it. And I'm not going to give the guy $400, obviously. But I really believe at some level, and I do, I think we are to do the right thing. Do the right thing. I know people who never give to a church because they don't like what the church does with the money. So hang on just a second. You are not going to be faithful because you believe the investment doesn't turn out what you think is ideal. Do you really think that's God's going to go, well done, well done. That was so much better to buy that bigger house. Great move. we see pretty clearly all through the text that our faithfulness to do the right thing, that step, that weight is on us. We are not more faithful if they respond well, and we are not less faithful. So listen to me. If you give to something, your time, energy, money, whatever it may be, if you give to something and they do something really cool with it, you're not more faithful. If you give to something to it and you did your best and you thought it was really good and they do something and it falls apart, you're not less faithful before God because they did something sinful. Now, you need to be wise. I'm not saying be stupid. Be wise. But man, God's economy is different. Your neighbor, the people all around you, are desperately waiting for you to do the right thing over how you feel and independent of how they respond to it. What do we know so far about evangelism? You are to share no matter the outcome. You are to be faithful. If the pagan sailors never would have responded, or if Nineveh would have never come to know God, he was still called to be faithful. There are people searching all around us. Second thing we know so far about evangelism, there are people searching all around us, but we are easily distracted by our own little internal miserable things. We're blind to our own internal darkness. We don't listen to the conversations at the hair salon. We don't listen to the conversations, at our work or whatever. We're so internal. We're so turned in. We can't speak light to it because we're so focused on us. And the last thing that we've learned so far about evangelism is our hearts don't have to be perfect to be used by God. Another common thing I hear is, Mike, you don't understand. I'm a pretty messy Christian and I've got a lot of issues. Welcome to the club. You can still be used by God in a really great way. This is a bit speculative, but we know a few things from the text and reading through a bunch of the commentaries. After Jonah was thrown overboard, the storm stops. There were things floating in the sea, most likely, because the sailors emptied the boat. It was common to have a mast lowered during a storm so it wouldn't break, especially one that severe. Jonah is the one at times attributed to being the author of the book, so maybe he had a heart change later on. But it's very likely that in the middle of all this going on, Jonah is out there, thrown over on the side or thrown over the boat. The storm stops. He probably grabbed onto something if something was floating out there. He's sitting there looking up in the boat. I can only imagine this. I don't know this. But it's not too far-fetched from how the text is laid out. He's looking up in the boat, and he had to have seen them make covenants with God because it's written in the text. Some of us, we are in our miserable spot. Okay, now hang with me. This is really important. Give me just 2 minutes. Some of us are in our miserable spot right now in life. We're frustrated with our finances. We're frustrated with the job we have. We're frustrated with relational issues. We're frustrated with all this stuff, and we're internal. We're not paying attention. The storm is raging, and we walk down below and try to just tone it all out. And then finally, in the middle of all that, we're praying to God, God, change my circumstances. Lord, I would love to have a little bit more money. I'd love to have a little bit nicer job. I'd love to have a little bit better health. I'd love to have, you name it. We call out to God, and it's like we finally get thrown into the sea, and we're sitting out there. We're in the sea. Everything's totally awful. And instead of God rescuing us in a temporal way, it's like a monstrous big thing comes up and swallows us whole. Then people shake their fist at God. Why? Jonah 1:17, and the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. There's a lot of symbolism there. We don't have time to go into it at the moment. And actually the Hebrew word, phrase, means aquatic beast. So we don't even know exactly what it is, but we translate it fish. And many scholars think that Jonah may have even died. He was killed. And it was in this Sheol holding place that all of this torment stuff happens to him, where he calls out to God. We don't know. Or was he in the fish literally, like the old cartoon? I don't know. But I do know this. You may be in a season where you are so closed off to the needs of everybody around you. You drive down your street, you go past the houses, you open up your garage door, you drive in and close it, and you just try to deal with your own issues, and you have no time to help anybody else. And instead of God rescuing you from it, He lets a fish swallow you whole. Because the greatest win in life is not you richer. From a monetary perspective, the greatest win in life is not you in a bigger home. The greatest win in life is not you getting married. And I know a lot of our single, it's not getting married and finally having kids or finally having sex or whatever, right? Those are not the greatest wins in life. The greatest win in life is not you living to 100 years old. The greatest win in life is none of those things. The greatest win in life is a heart that is tender and right before God. So when you say, God, I want a little better life, God says, your heart's not right, and He gets a hold of your heart. And in the belly of the beast, when you have nothing left, He does surgery on the deepest part of who you are. He reshapes your priorities. He changes your perspectives. He grabs a hold of you in such a deep way that you will never be the same. Even if you reject Him, you will never be the same. And something unbelievably powerful happens. But we're out of time. We'll do it next week.